I can smell trouble right here in this apartment. First you smash your leg, then you get to looking out the window, see things you shouldn't see. Trouble.
Welcome to Now Playing Podcast Review of Rear Window.
We become a race of peeping toms.
A review chosen by Now Playing patron Ule Horve.
Even if I had to pay, it would be worth it. Just for the occasion.
Hosted by Jakob.
I'm not much on Rear Window ethics.
Arnie.
Window shopper.
And Stuart.
We are still maladjusted misfits, and we have loved every minute of it.
This episode will contain detailed plot spoilers and mildly objectionable language.
Oh, Stella, your choice of words.
Nobody ever invented a polite word for a killing yet.
We hope you enjoy the show.
Tell me everything you saw. And what you think it means.
Today we're discussing Rear Window, starring James Stewart, Grace Kelly, Wendell Corey, Thelma Ritter, Raymond Burr, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. This is the Now Playing co-host who's over 40 and wakes up feeling tired and run down, Arnie.
And Stuart.
And this is the co-host who isn't shy. I've been looked at before, Jakob.
And welcome, listeners, to, I think, the most unusual retrospective we've ever attempted. One that I'm really jazzed about. Not my idea, but boy, do I love the idea of not following a storyline as it remakes itself in traditional ways and usually, frankly, gets worse. We're following unofficial remakes, starting with the classic Rear Window and then going to movies that are not direct sequels, are not directly tied, but come on. We all know that Brian De Palma loves Hitchcock. We all know that Body Double is Rear Window. We all know that Shia LaBeouf was cribbing from the Master of Suspense when he made Disturbia. This is all the grand idea of one of our patrons who's on the line with us now.
Yes.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us, Ole.
Thank you for having me.
You're not a stranger. You donated before for a thriller a couple years ago. We covered The Vanishing. I think we all enjoyed that film.
For sure.
Well, first, why did you want us to cover 3 movies in an unofficial retrospective?
I think it's because first I wanted you guys to discuss Disturbia because that was kind of a childhood favorite for me. But I also wanted it to have sort of a larger context around it. And so I thought it would be interesting to hear your thoughts about Hitchcock and also De Palma, who I'm a fan of.
Wow, you're making me feel old. Disturbia was a childhood favorite. I remember watching it.
Yeah, Dagger in the Heart. I've never seen that one. So that's interesting. You didn't come to this necessarily because you wanted to cover Rear Window. It's just because Rear Window is so obviously influential in that 2006 thriller, whatever it was.
Yeah, and I also sort of like worked my way backwards from Disturbia, and I became more interested in film history when I grew a little bit older, and yeah.
I think that is cool too. I mean, I do think, for my reference, like, I think Fright Night was my, window into Rear Window of, somebody looks out their bedroom window and thinks they see a crime, and that one, it's a vampire biting into a girl. But yeah, I love that you fall in love with a version of a movie and then realize that it's a trope or that it's a part of something that's a part of cinema history, following that storyline, that thread back to its genesis. Yeah, to me, that is the reward of being a cinema fan, is to be able to go back into a rich history and see a story you love told again and again.
So how do you feel about Hitchcock overall, Ole?
I think he was my introduction into older films. I remember seeing Psycho on TV with my parents, probably when I was 9 or 10 or something. And I think his sort of way of building tension is very, informed by silent film and stuff. So you can always sort of appreciate it despite language barriers and everything. So yeah, he's really drawn me into film history and American movies. And then I sort of discovered Rear Window after Psycho and Disturbia. And I think it was, I was an only child and watched a lot of movies, so I could sort of relate to the idea of looking outside your window and becoming invested in other people's stories.
Just being a loner, looking around, taking it all in.
Yeah.
No siblings to bug you.
Yeah.
Jakob, I'm hearing some identification there.
I wish I was an only child. I'm the oldest of 6. I beg to be an only child.
It should be said, we have only covered the Master of Suspense once before, which is kind of crazy, but he is someone that stopped working after the mid-70s, so maybe it's not that surprising. We kind of start in the mid-70s. Most of our focus is 80s and beyond. Yeah, other than Psycho, we have not touched what are, at least a dozen bona fide classics. I will say this, Rear Window, I don't know what my first Hitchcock movie was ever, but the first one that when I went to film school they showed, the one that they thought was most representative of Hitchcock was Rear Window. That's the one they showed in my film history class to give everyone an idea about who this director was.
I'll say with Hitchcock, I probably know all his big ones, The Bird, Psycho. I've seen those, but I've seen most of his stuff as a child for whatever reason. Maybe it was cheap to put on TV. So I've wanted to come back and revisit him as an adult and watch his stuff because Rear Window, this is a movie I thought I had seen. Look, I have a dad who's really into Turner Classics, and he'll text me, hey, this movie is showing on Thursday at 6 p.m. because he doesn't know what a DVR or streaming is. He loves old movies, so I know he showed me this one. I thought I knew this movie. I thought I had seen it in parts, but had seen the whole thing at some point if I added all those different viewings up. But I knew all the tropes. I know he made me sit through the beginning where you go from window to window. I felt like I knew a lot of this, but I don't think I've ever seen it all the way through in one sitting.
And I saw Psycho as a teenager, and that was the only Hitchcock film I'd seen for many, many years.
That's it, not The Birds?
I've still never seen The Birds. I'm waiting for the now playing retrospective series to do the Birds series.
With Birdemic, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's got to be the capper. But a couple years ago, as I was doing this poster of 100 classic movies that you have to see throughout the ages, one of them was Rear Window. So I've seen this movie, and then because I felt like I just was missing it, and I was a big fan growing up of Mel Brooks' High Anxiety, I watched the movie Vertigo. And I greatly enjoyed Vertigo. What I thought of Rear Window, we're going to discuss it.
Okay. Well, interesting that you responded more to Vertigo, it sounds like. Vertigo is, I think, when the film snobs get together and talk about the great Hitchcock ones, Vertigo always seems to wind up on the top. The thing I'll give you is, you can watch Hitchcock, and I think general audiences watch Hitchcock mostly for his plots. And he is known as a gimmick director. Every movie he does, he will try something new, something he hasn't done before. And you can just enjoy them as superficial mysteries. But film snobs, they love, the French particularly, have written extensively about subtext. What is this guy really talking about? And because Hitchcock is so much about voyeurism and projection, Vertigo is the one to talk about, maybe about how creepy that is. It's a really disturbing film when you really analyze what's going on, but
that goes back to my point about seeing Hitchcock as an adult. I saw Vertigo as a college student. I'm like, this is the dumbest movie ever. And then I did rewatch that one a few years ago. I'm like, no, this one is pretty genius.
Yeah, some people will say it's about necrophilia. That might be exaggerating a little.
That's going a little too far.
But I know what they mean. And so, again, what I'm here to do when I sit back, now that I've had my film education, is not only appreciate what is Hitchcock doing for the public, but what is he revealing about himself. And I think one of the reasons why Rear Window is still talked a lot about with critics is because it's kind of autobiographical, because it is the story of a man who sits there and watches little picture boxes with all these different stories in it and wants to control it, wants to belong to it, and has issues. And I think if you look at where Hitchcock was at the time of this making, he did fall in love with Grace Kelly. He was at the height of his fame. It should just be said that he had been in Hollywood for almost 15 years, had been up for Oscars, was the superstar, was the brand. You could just say Alfred Hitchcock made the movie and people would line up. But he became on a different level after Rear Window. He fell in love with Grace Kelly. He stopped bringing his own wife in as creative consultant as much. And I do think that he sort of explains his process in this movie. So some of the fun for me in watching Rear Window is the postmodern quality of Hitchcock taking you behind the curtain and showing you how he does it.
I look forward to hearing you as we discuss this movie talk about that, because all I know about Hitchcock's private life is what was in that biographical film that had Scarlett Johansson, and I'm blanking on who played Hitchcock. Was it Anthony Hopkins?
Under a lot of facial putty, yes.
That's all I know about him. So I do not get his process when I watch this film. I get a mystery murder.
Yeah. And you should. Again, he is the master of suspense. That was his moniker. And this was based on a Pulp Fiction writer's popular short story from a decade before. I did pick it up, but did you guys even aware or care that it has literary origins to Cornell Woolrich?
I was not aware, and I don't think I care. Is it a really good short story? Maybe if it's really good, I'll care.
Well, do you like Pulp Fiction?
The movie or just the genre of literature?
Not Tarantino. I'm just saying that if you like that noir world where, there just used to be rags, newsprint. You could just get a magazine filled of lurid stories about detectives and crimes and murders all the time. Cornell Woolrich was considered one of the best at that. It's breezy. It's largely the frame of this story told in 13 pages. The difference between movie and story is that you do not have a backstory for the first person narrator. That everything is being told to you by someone that is sitting at a window and watching this thing unfold with one neighbor. We don't really have a purview into a whole neighborhood, but it is someone at the window, and what does that mean? And I think the connotations of a Peeping Tom at that time were pretty sordid. So the idea that it turns out in the last sentence, we find out it's an old man with a broken leg and that he was stuck there, that he was one of us, and that he's not just a snooper that goes peeking into someone's windows, I think was the twist. But yeah, a moderately entertaining little story that obviously gets transformed by Hitchcock. What the writer didn't care about is obviously what Hitchcock is obsessed about, which is how the neighborhood sort of influences the subjective mind of our character. Like, it's not just the story of a murder when we talk about Rear Window. If anything, it's the story of a watcher. And Hitch did also fill in the details. There wasn't a whole lot about how the murder happened. He tends to go to true crime. If you remember, Psycho is allegedly based on Ed Gein, and Rope was unofficially Leopold and Loeb. He did find some real-life murderers. There was a bookkeeper who cut up a woman, chopped her up into body parts, and couldn't get rid of the head, so he put her in the fireplace. That detail stuck with him. He wanted to bring that into this movie. And then the other was this doctor who was married and killed his wife and wanted to run away with his mistress, so he claimed his wife got on a train and dressed up his mistress, and they got busted because she was caught wearing the wife's jewelry. You'll see elements of those plots fill in sort of the screenplay here.
I gotta ask, was there controversy around this film? Because we've talked about American 50s films. I know Hitchcock's British, but I feel like this falls into that category with Jimmy Stewart, where they just never push boundaries enough. And I was kind of shocked, not with just some of the sexual elements of this film, but with the descriptions of crime. When you get Stella, this nurse, describing blood splatter and all that, I don't know, it felt a little racy for 1954. Was there controversy with those elements?
Absolutely. I mean, we've just been talking about Frankenstein. That production code was still in place. Now, it was falling apart, but yes.
Okay, so no MPA yet.
Oh, yeah, not until the late 60s. But they had huge problems with almost everything. And it was somebody at Paramount's job to sort of persuade them, wine and dine them, trick them, really. What they did was take them on a studio tour. The gimmick that Hitchcock uses in this film is that he wants to take a courtyard in Greenwich Village and just build it, a facsimile of it on a Paramount stage. And so he is going to be able to control all elements of the outside world and just have everything sort of stage bound, that it will be one character looking out his window at this incredible set that took, I think, 6 weeks to make and a whole lot of the production budget. Just touring the production code guys through that set, they were so impressed that money does a lot. Wining and dining and meeting celebrities did a lot to influence what could go out and what was demanded to be changed. And Hitchcock and his people had a way of getting what he wanted. He's pretty subversive in this movie, but there were a lot of things they wanted cut out. I mean, just the dancer, putting on her bra, they wanted that gone.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things in here that shocked me. I'm I can't believe they got away with this in 1954.
Yeah, 1954, this shouldn't have happened like this, but Alfred Hitchcock was always pushing that envelope. Psycho pushed that envelope. And yes, I think that he got away with something here and got a big hit. Again, I want to just reestablish he was already a beloved director at this time, but after this, he launches into what's considered his golden period. All the films that you think about, including Vertigo and Psycho, Birds, they all come after this. This is really his creative peak, starting with this film. He had just signed a 5-picture deal with Paramount, and they gave him unlimited power, and yeah, he's really able to be more Hitchcock than he's ever been. And it earned some Oscar nominations, lost them all. Hitchcock famously never won an Oscar for directing, even though he's considered the best.
What beat this out?
It's the same year as On the Waterfront, and Grace Kelly made another movie, so she won for that and not this film. And Jimmy Stewart, too, he had made the Glenn Miller story, so he won for that and not this movie.
So people from this one, just not for this.
Yeah, again, I think the thing about Hitchcock is he's considered lighter entertainment. These are just, pot boiler thrillers. It really wasn't until the French and film criticism became a thing in the 60s, he was reevaluated as someone that had more substance to him, that he was an artist, became something sort of retroactively understood. But in his day, he was just thought of someone that, appeared on film or TV. By this point, it should be said he had his show, but that he was just someone that was going to have a little twist to spook you. And I think, this movie was just dismissible as a thriller and not a best picture. But I like this movie better than On the Waterfront. We'll find out. Arnie, why don't you give him the plot? We'll get into it.
L.B. Jeffries, called Jeff and played by Jimmy Stewart, is a magazine photographer who's been laid up for 6 weeks with a broken leg. Spending all those days at his New York apartment, Jeff has passed the time by watching his neighbors out his window and through theirs. That is, when he's not arguing with his attractive girlfriend Lisa, played by Grace Kelly, with whom he sees no future due to his traveling around the world to uncomfortable places for photography assignments and her being a pampered upper-crust saleswoman. In the middle of one night, while looking out his window, Jeff sees some strange goings-on. One of the neighbors he's been watching, a man named Thorwald, makes several trips outside in the rain, taking his briefcase on every trip. The next day, Thorwald's wife is gone from the apartment, and Jeff sees Thorwald with a big saw and a large knife, which Thorwald is wrapping in newspaper. Jeff becomes convinced Thorwald killed his wife and cut up the body. Jeff shares his thoughts with Lisa, who's also convinced by Jeff's circumstantial evidence, as is Jeff's visiting nurse, Stella. Less convinced, though, is Jeff's NYPD friend, Detective Tom Doyle. The cop investigates and finds out Mrs. Thorwald has just gone upstate to be with family. Despite being blown off by Doyle, Jeff is still convinced and, with help from Lisa and Stella, he ups his investigation. Jeff sends a note to Thorwald, which Lisa slips under the man's door. Then Jeff calls Thorwald and pretends to be a blackmailer, tricking Thorwald into leaving his apartment so Lisa can break in and look for evidence. Lisa finds Mrs. Thorwald's wedding ring, which she and Jeff take as final proof Mrs. Thorwald is dead, as no married woman would take off her wedding ring. But Thorwald returns home and starts to attack Lisa, who did break into the man's apartment. Desperate, Jeff calls the police to help Lisa, and they do, though they arrest Lisa for breaking and entering. But taking that ring as proof, Jeff calls back Detective Doyle and asks him to come over. But Thorwald noticed Lisa motioning to Jeff across the courtyard and realized who has been spying on him. Once the police leave, Thorwald goes to Jeff's apartment and attacks the wheelchair-bound photographer. Just then, Doyle and the other police officers arrive, just in time to see Thorwald trying to push Jeff out the window. Jeff does fall, but lands on some police officers. Then Doyle arrests Thorwald, who confesses to murdering his wife. And we cut to a few days later and see Jeff in his wheelchair, now with 2 broken legs, and Lisa sits nearby reading a fashion magazine as credits roll.
As they start, should be said, I think Ole mentioned the fact that he was attracted to Hitchcock because he had visuals that were almost like silent movies. And let's not forget, Hitchcock spent a decade in that era. Like, he had been around since the 20s. And so he is very much beloved for his ability to show and not tell. And what we have, what always gets cited, I remember from my film class, what we were asked to observe first was how so much information about Jeff and his neighborhood is conveyed just in a sweeping tracking shot here in the opening.
And you talk about the topic of voyeurism, like should we be peeping toms along with Jimmy Stewart here? What helps, at least me at the beginning here, help this all go down as we peek into people's windows and get pieces of this story. There's a heat wave going on. People sleeping on the balcony. It's so hot. I love this Franz Waxman opening jazzy score here. Like, it just feels more playful. Like, if you put scary, creepy music, maybe you feel dirty about being a voyeur in this, but this score, like, we're going to see this piano player having parties all the time. I feel like we're more on that side of things than creepy perverts looking through windows.
One thing I noticed is there's not a lot of score in this movie.
No.
but there is here in this opening, as you talk about. And honestly, my first impression as we see this set that you say really influenced the MPAA, this huge set, I was impressed by its scale and yet its artifice. My first thought was this looks like Sesame Street. I became a little bit more impressed with it as we see all the detail and all of the people behind the windows. But my initial reaction was the artifice of it just put me off for about the first 10 minutes of the movie during this big opening tracking shot.
Wow, because this is what pulls me in. If you say Hitchcock's a gimmick guy, this is a great gimmick. Just this way of telling a story. I feel like I'm looking at like comic book panels in the newspaper, getting these stories about these people's lives throughout the film. I think this is a great gimmick, if you want to call it that, a setup. I never thought of Sesame Street.
Well, I know what you mean, Arnie. Like, no one will look at this. They could have. It should be said, by this point, the studio system was still in place, but people were shooting on location. And they could have gone to New York, Greenwich Village, and shot. They based it on an actual courtyard. So they could have gone there and filmed and used more natural. It would have created the idea of something more realistic than this movie is going to have. What gets played up about this movie, what gets talked about so much, is that it captures a subjective state. We're not watching reality. We're watching how a man that used to be able to go out and engage in the world, but is now stuck in one place, impotent, if you were, is experiencing the world. And so everything is fed through the way Jeff sees it and not how it actually is, if that makes sense. That this feels sort of artificial and dreamy, like a movie. I mean, there is a lot that has been written about how Jeff is a moviegoer and that he is sitting there watching tragedy, comedy, sex, what have you, elements of a movie playing out in front of him. He is, in fact, us.
Yeah, if you've seen Synecdoche, New York, the Charlie Kaufman film, where they do this on a city level scale, like, I do feel like Kaufman saw this film and like, yeah, let's ramp that up even more and like really delve into the private lives of people. Like, it's something that pulls me in right away. Like, again, maybe I'm a bit of a pervert wanting to look through these windows, but I find it fascinating to watch people when they don't know they're being watched, which is a big theme here.
On the second viewing, I did find a lot more interest in these people's lives that he's peeking into. On the first time I watched this movie, I knew it was about a guy who sees a murder out his window. And I'll admit, I really wanted to get to that murder a lot more and spend less time with Mrs. Lonely Heart, who is very lonely and has dinners with herself. And
you don't enjoy watching her? Yeah, that stuff's great. I don't know. I really like that stuff.
I'm saying I enjoyed it more on this viewing than I did on the first viewing. On the first viewing, I wanted to get to the murder.
Okay.
And what I suspect that will be a challenge for most modern audiences, that this movie is slow paced in a way that your expectation is, because this story has been told so often and we're so familiar with it, okay, just get to the stuff. We know that something bad is going to happen in one of these windows. We're here for murder. Again, I want to help reorient people. This movie is not about a murder mystery. This movie is about a peeping Tom. This is about a guy who watches and his subjective state and how he feels is what he projects into those windows. One could even argue he wouldn't even see the murder if he wasn't having such inner turmoil. And that comes out again in this opening tracking shot. We survey all the different players, and I want to point out that they're all different facets of movie making, right? There's the art department, the woman that's sculpting. There's the guy creating the music. There's a newlywed couple that'll be bringing the sex appeal. There's the sad Miss Lonely Hearts that brings the drama.
I thought Miss Torso was the sex appeal.
No, Miss Torso to me means movement. You know, she is dancing around her apartment. Of course, yes, obviously she's
got all the men coming over too.
I get that, yes. But the newlyweds are the ones actually having all of the sex all the time. And of course, comic relief with the little dog and the couple that sleeps on the fire escape as well. These are all elements, genre elements, that all filmmakers, all directors play with. And Hitchcock is surveying all the different elements of his story and seeing what will matter to Jeff as we finally pan into his room. Again, it's always talked about how great in one shot we see why he's in the situation he is. There's the cast, there's the broken camera, there's the photograph that he got while breaking his leg in the camera, and who he is a celebrated photojournalist whose work winds up on the cover of Life magazine. And it's a strange mix of A-bombs and fashion models. He can do both kinds of work. And right now, he'd really love to be going to Kashmir to film some more, but he's got one more week in this cast.
Yeah, I love this opening tracking through like the story of how he got those broken legs. They're going to make it explicit later on and tell us exactly what happened. But yeah, you see a smashed camera, a photo of a car accident, like great storytelling. Again, show, don't tell.
What threw me is he's got the negative image of a model like framed, and we see that, and I'm like, is that his girlfriend? That's really creepy to have a negative image. But then we see it's this fashion model from the cover, and we pan to the cover and see what it is the negative of.
Yeah, the fact that he had the negative, I took it, oh, they're dating, or that's an ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or something. That's a special relationship there to have the negative.
Yeah, that's the plot reason. And then, of course, the subjective reason. I've talked about how film critics like just go obsessively frame by frame through his pictures to find subversive meanings. And I think for so many of those viewers, this is, you know, the way that he sees the world versus the way his girlfriend sees the world. The negative and the positive, the external and the internal, is that he poo-poos at the world of high fashion, that he had to do the cover of Life magazine and film this smiling pretty woman. Well, that's not what he wants to do. He wants to be known as someone that goes out there and gets the drama, the car accidents, the fires, the burning. You see what he's drawn to, and that's what makes his relationship with Grace Kelly so combustible, that she sees beauty when she looks out the window and he sees pain.
Yeah, his girlfriend, Lisa, is very stubborn because she brings him a dinner since he's been trapped in there, this high fancy restaurant dinner, and he's a dick to her. He's just the entire meal rude to her.
He is a jerk.
I'm like, any woman, especially one who you assume has a lot of options for boyfriends, she's attractive, she's rich, she is a working girl. You've got all these things, and she puts up with a lot of abuse from him that night. And she brought him a nice dinner. I'm like, even if you don't want to marry her, you don't have to be so rude.
Well, one, that's, you know, Jimmy Stewart in a nutshell. If you look at his career, he typically is a flustered, an everyman, but one that can get away with making little jabs and comments like that. It was common in the convention of, you know, screwball comedies to have the woman always like being light and fluffy and airy, and the man being curmudgeonly, concerned about his career, irritated by her. Some of this is just genre convention, and Jimmy Stewart's, you know, persona at this time. Should be said, he is the number one star in America when this movie comes out. He is the biggest box office person that you could get. This is your Tom Cruise on the screen.
If you're looking at this through the lens that Jeff equals Hitchcock, yeah, I think we've talked about this throughout different films. There was always that struggle as an artist. Like, do you do what your passion is, or do you sell out and just make some money? And I feel like that is the conversation. That is the relationship with Lisa, is she offers him, like, you can just shoot like fashion shows and have an easy life, make a lot of money. But no, he wants to be in the trenches doing that real work.
Yeah. Or is there something else there? I will ask you, I'm hearing you dig into this relationship. I will argue this is a movie about this relationship. The murder schmurder. The murder is really the shadow counterpart between the bickering. What is going on in the little pictures outside is oftentimes projection of what's going on between these two. And so why is this couple together, and should they be together? I always find that a lot of people, yes, take Grace Kelly's side and feel like she's a pretty girl. Why won't he give her attention?
I don't know. I actually take his side in that their lifestyles are so different that they're probably not a good match, and they probably wouldn't make for a good marriage. But she's so persistent that I understand that he's being more realistic and she's being more idealistic is how I view it.
Okay.
She's probably not the kind who would enjoy being left at home for months while he goes to Kashmir.
No, yeah, that's clearly, I mean, before we even meet her, it should be said, we've had a few things building up to the fact that he's not happy. Yes, even more than the broken leg, he's not happy that he's saddled with this engagement. He is engaged to be married, and yet he never speaks positively of Lisa. He gets a phone call from his editor and talks about nagging wives. This is also the same time we cut across the courtyard and see the couple where the murder is going to happen for the first time, creating that parallel between his feelings about marriage and the murder storyline. Then we have this physical therapist, a real scene stealer, Thelma Ritter.
Yes, Stella.
Yeah, Stella is kind of my favorite character in this.
Yes.
But she comes in there very judgmental, very much speaking to theme of we have all become a race of peeping toms who need to look internally and not externally. That is his problem as she sees it, is that he keeps wanting to go out into the world, look away from this relationship, see darkness and horrible negative. And yes, this girl, it's attraction of opposites, right? She's into him in part because she doesn't see a dark world. And he, for all of his complaining about not wanting to be saddled with someone so prissy, doesn't want to break up with her, can appreciate her beauty. When she's actually saying goodbye and not goodnight, he's afraid, can't we keep it the status quo? He definitely wants her, but it's not easy for him to look internally and to look at this relationship. And this is the story, I see it as marriage counseling. This is the story of a couple who works through their issues through murder about why they may not want to be together.
And on the topic of voyeurism, I think what's interesting with Stella, this nurse, is, she has all this homespun wisdom, we're a race of peeping toms, all this, but she's going to get pulled in just as much. I do think Hitchcock's saying something about the power of maybe not just movies, but just voyeurism and getting lost in other people's lives and all that with Stella, because she has probably the most drastic turn in her character, accepting this.
Darkness.
Yeah.
In the end, yes, as much as we might want to say that I kind of don't like her comment that like intelligence has gotten people in trouble. Just live a, surface life. And I was a misfit when I married my husband and we're still misfits now, but we stay married by not analyzing it. That part, I don't know if I go with.
Yeah, I don't like that kind of stuff.
But I think people need to look at their relationship and see how they truly feel. But yes, she will get sucked in. Everyone in the end will be seduced by what Jeff sees. But Jeff is the first to see it. I don't think Jeff would be able to notice a murder happen if he were not in this angry state about marriage. If he were a more happy, well-adjusted guy, if he was the newlywed or the couple on the landing or anybody else in this complex, you would be in a different emotional state and you would not be focused on finding that murderous impulse. Because he is so dissatisfied with Lisa and where his life is, being at that crossroads is why he is able to interpret clues other people will miss.
But as you mentioned, Stuart, this is a slower paced film. It's going to be a good half an hour of Jimmy Stewart discussing his life and having dinner with Lisa before we even get to that part of the plot. If you came into this movie knowing nothing, and after so many years and it being so famous, I don't know if it's possible, kind of like the shower scene in Psycho. You're pre-spoiled about Rear Window just by what it is in pop culture. But if you're coming in waiting for that, it's going to be a while. And if you come in completely blank, you may not even know it's going to get there. You may be wondering where it's going at the 30-minute mark because it does seem to meander.
Yeah.
I have not felt that meandering, someone with more modern sensibilities, but yeah, I've liked, again, just exploring this little courtyard, going around. It feels like very experimental film, like we're going to tell short stories through the windows and all that. And then, yeah, I like all this conversation between Stella and Jeff and Lisa. I don't know, all this drama. It's setting up characters, relationships. I'm writing down little lines to see if those things play out towards the end that people are predicting. Again, especially for a modern film, if you're waiting for the murder, this is a slow buildup, but there is so much going on. My attention's always wrapped in this film.
Your attention may be wrapped, but is that not the definition of meandering, going from window to window and seeing these little things?
Not if it's telling a story and building up an arc and all that. No, I wouldn't say that's meandering.
Here's what the critics would tell you, Arnie. Every single detail has been thought about and is here for a reason. So it can't be meandering because meandering means to have no agenda. But it is very, very loose.
Yeah.
And yes, if your agenda is give me a juicy murder and let me see them solve and crack the crime and bring them to justice, why is it taking this long is a very valid question, which is why I try to help reorient people that this is not about murder. This is about anxiety over marriage, and this is about projection. This is maybe about the movie-going experience. You have a guy who normally makes movies and is now forced to sit there and look at these images, and yes, he sees only the worst. He is the one that hears the scream at the half-hour mark that, again, no one else thinks murder. No one else dials into this.
Yeah, you hear a scream, then someone yells, don't, and then broken glass. It's all dark. And yeah, is that the murder? Like, I feel like they'll resolve a lot of the clues and hints that they see, but like, yeah, this scream or anything, not everything gets spelled out. Is just kind of the hint that maybe something bad happened.
Nothing gets spelled out. I feel like if you were to cut this movie down to the clues that Jimmy Stewart sees, I dare say very few people would say murder. We never see any blood.
I agree, which means I'm going to be very confused at the end of this film when it is murder, because I thought it was setting up something different.
I agree completely. I mean, what he sees, he's really projecting murder on there because what you see is a guy leaving his apartment in the rain after hearing that scream. He goes out several times with a briefcase in the night. And so much of this movie, like 99% of this movie, is told from the view of Jimmy Stewart looking out the window, right?
Yeah, that's the gimmick.
But there's one scene where Jimmy Stewart falls asleep and we get to see what he doesn't see, which is Thorwald leaving the apartment with a woman. And I feel like that's almost a cheat. Why do we get to see that if Jimmy Stewart doesn't see that? And it'll come into play later on. But because of that one brief moment, I didn't remember this movie from when I saw it a few years ago. I thought there was a murder, but because of that scene, I questioned Jimmy Stewart this whole time. It feels like not even circumstantial evidence for a murder. It feels like somebody making up a murder and looking for things to support that.
Bravo. That's the point of the movie. That is what the movie is about. It's about an unhappy person who is taking his feelings about his wife-to-be and projecting it onto all of these different elements of film. And yes, this is the murder room. This is where he can get those feelings out. But that's, let me put it this way. If you were only here for a suspense film, that is one room in a courtyard. There is so much going on, and so much about this is really about Jimmy Stewart's subjective experience. It is not about putting these clues together and solving that murder. And that is the trick of this movie that will surprise and maybe piss off people.
Yeah, if Jeff had seen Thorwald with that woman, would he have gone on this goose chase here? Like, I think he would have dropped it and moved on to some other window to try to figure out.
There she is. Or would he just obsessively, because every time he talks about wife's nag or whatever, and we cut over that. This is essentially the story. I mean, it's worth pointing out that Lisa gets put in that room and is almost killed too. It is in some ways wish fulfillment.
Which I thought was the ending.
Yeah, it's almost wish fulfillment, right? Like, I want to end this relationship. This thing makes me unhappy. And so this little story is my story. I'm projecting my feelings into this room. He obsesses on it. That's one thing that is, I think, a constant in a lot of Hitchcock movies, particularly of this era, is obsession. The male gaze, he has seen something and he can't let it go.
And do you buy into Jeff's vision? Because I know definitely the way he projects, whatever he's going through, I do sometimes see on these other families in the windows, like that newlywed couple. They seem so happy when they come in. They pull that shade down so they can get busy. And then every once in a while, you'll see that newlywed husband, like, just come to the window into that wife beater and smoking. And I'm like, oh, now he's not so happy because Jeff isn't happy. And so I do feel at times like what he's going through, I go through with my interpretations of these neighbors.
I never feel like they don't reflect the looker. And that's sort of the thesis, is that what you see, how you understand the world, is how you feel internally. And that's why everything is subjective, that there is no objective reality. The postmodern idea, when Grace Kelly gets involved, at first she doesn't see murder. She looks at Miss Torso, the dancer, and she sees all those men like in her room. He thinks, oh, she's getting action. And she's like, no, she's not in love with any of those men. She's waiting for something. And what you bring to the table is what you see. Is I think it shows, again, this is the woman's intuition, and the beauty that she sees in the world is very different from the way that Jeff sees the world. And yet, over the course of this story, they find a balance where both their views can come to the same centerpiece. And I think that's what's cool about this movie, is that it brings this couple together.
Yeah, I know the name Grace Kelly. I don't know. Her face doesn't stick out like an Audrey Hepburn when it comes to older actresses or something, but I know the name. I'm sure I've seen other movies with her in it. But in this, especially around the 50-minute mark, because she's been fighting with Jeff this whole time. Oh, you're just seeing things. But at one point, she sees like the suitcase getting tied up and the mattress rolled up. And she turns to Jeff and she's like, let's start from the beginning, Jeff. What did you see? What do you think? And I'm like, that was a moment, like, because I was watching this alone in my house, like, I just gave it a little applause. I love that turn of her character, how she was so against this, and she finally buys into his vision and makes those comments. I'm like, it's such a great turn on her character.
I want to compliment the acting in this film. I think Jimmy Stewart is always great in everything I see him in. I'm a big Jimmy Stewart fan. Someday we have to cover It's a Wonderful Life. If I'm not mistaken, you've never seen that, Stuart.
Stewart's favorite Christmas movie.
Not entirely. Yeah, I mean, bits. I feel like I know it without having seen it, but you tell me no.
And then Grace Kelly is amazing in this too. At first, I think she's just going to be this put upon girlfriend, which is such a stereotypical role. But this moment you talk about, Jacob, there's a turn and she plays it beautifully.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's honestly the acting that's pulling me in more than the storytelling.
Yeah, because she loves Jeff, she's willing to listen to him. And because he is such the filmmaker that he is, he's able to sell the idea that what they've seen, which is not in any way objectively conclusive about anything. I certainly would never say a murder happened in that place because we heard a scream, a broken glass, and a trunk got bound by rope. But she gets sold on him because, in part, she loves him. Yes, we see her getting pulled into that. And again, Hitchcock, master with the camera, actually pushes the camera in as she looks out. That tension, that relationship. Yes, we're now in Act 2, and this will be about them working together on the same idea of the outside world, which again, you have to realize they start on opposite ends. She wants him to stay home. He wants her to go out into the world.
Well, that's what's so great about her turn is you talked about this first boring 30 minutes where they're fighting and arguing, and Jeff is like, hey, can you eat fish heads and rice? Can you get shot at and run in the jungle with high heels? And when she makes this comment, this is that moment where she's like, okay, I'll try those fish heads. And like, it's such a great character moment because of that argument and that fight earlier on and all that character work they've set up.
I'll just put it this way. I think Jeff is fearful. He is afraid. He can run into a burning building. He can stand before an A-bomb explosion, but he can't deal with his emotions, and he can't deal with the vulnerability of being with a woman who is so beautiful and in love with him. And so he runs away and creates reasons that don't feel completely convincing about why they shouldn't be together, because he is afraid. And what's kind of nice about this is that he gets over himself by letting her do some of the work that he would normally do. He's stuck in a wheelchair. He can't move. So she has to be the one to go out there, and she becomes the thing that he claims she could never be. You know, he will make the case early on that she could never run around in high heels and do the adventure that he does. Well, she's going to be scaling ladders and straddling into that window of the crime scene. She is going to be his dream girl by the end. And again, the middle of this movie, the way that I would frame this are two people that have very different visions of the world start seeing the same thing and fall in love. You're watching these two finally commit in the middle of this movie. And yes, they're also solving a crime. Again, that's what's happening on the surface. Yes, we're getting closer. We're getting details about somebody dying. And they bring in this Tom Doyle character. It's mentioned. And Jimmy Stewart really was a World War II vet. He did have war stories. So they worked that into his character that an old war buddy is now a police detective who's going to do a little bit of investigation out of, friendship, but never is convinced that what Jeff sees is anything close to murder. Because why would anyone commit murder so blatantly in a courtyard in New York City in front of hundreds of people? That doesn't make any sense to him. So he dismisses it outright that Jeff could have seen any of this.
And it's this character of Doyle who really sells the period to me. Most of this is a timeless film, but then Doyle comes in and with his rat-a-tat delivery and especially his hat, it screams 1950s. It just is hysterical to me to see such a stereotypical 1950s character in this movie, which again, normally it definitely has its moments of the time, its use of rotary telephones and things like that, but it doesn't really feel dated in that way because it is so closed down. It is just stuck in an apartment. You're not seeing old cars. You're not seeing a ton of old fashion on the streets.
Some would say it's an obscure view because you can almost see the New York streets. And again, they're in Greenwich Village. They're in Manhattan, bustling and happening. You can see this little sliver between the buildings where there's a bar far off. And they do find business. Miss Lonely Hearts does go off into that bar at some point. But yeah, the joke is you'd look at this and think, oh, this is a terrible view. I want to get an apartment that has a view of the city. And the point is, of course, this is front row for, well, whatever you want to make of it. But for a cynical character, this is front row for all his anxieties about marriage and why he doesn't want to end up in a relationship. He has a front row seat to a wife being murdered by a husband. Now, we haven't talked about the details, but it's probably helpful at this point to see what they've nailed down. We have Old Ironsides, I'm forgetting his name, Raymond Burr,
Perry Mason.
Right, yeah. They know pretty early that he is a jewelry salesman, a door-to-door salesman.
No, wholesale. He sells to jewelry stores.
Yeah, there may be a reason why he's going back and forth with this suitcase, why he's putting some jewelry into that suitcase.
Except it's 2 a.m.
Yeah, it's late hours, but it's New York, city that never sleeps.
True, I guess.
I'm sure there's people doing business at 3 a.m. It could happen in New York.
They start work early in the jewelry district, apparently.
Right. He had a wife that was bedbound. And in one moment, which at the same time that Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart are arguing about their relationship, she seemed to catch him on the phone, on a long distance phone call. And it will be later speculated that this is the mistress that was in that black dress that Jimmy Stewart didn't see leaving the apartment.
I mean, thank God they're using rotary phones so we know they're doing long distance calls. Like if he's just holding up like a modern day phone, you're not going to know that. But this is like retroactively looking at this film. Like, yeah, I haven't bought into Jeff's vision, I think yet, because you see this moment where the wife's in the bed, the husband's on the phone. She gets up and walks and he hangs it up and like talks to her. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't get anything dangerous off that, but Jeff does. Like he took that as like a big moment. I'm like, what did he see that I did not?
Yeah, they're unhappy, but does that mean that this husband ended it that dramatically? Which is also the story of Jeff and Lisa. She leaves the apartment and we're not sure she's going to come back, but she does. And this is when she starts getting drawn into it as well. She will make the observation that the handbag is still there, that women don't leave without the handbag, and, circumstantial evidence, things that if you took to a court of law would in no way get this man indicted for murder.
Especially in 2024, they make a lot of sexist, conclusions in this. Yeah, don't leave without the handbag. A woman would never leave without her ring. I'm like, I don't think this is any evidence that would hold up.
No, I think that's true. Most people don't take off their wedding band. I mean, that is suspicious.
I take mine off every night to go to sleep.
Okay. Well, most people don't leave your apartment without their business, your wallet or your purse, whatever gendered thing you want to assign to what carries your business. And most people don't leave without a wedding band if they're staying married. And so it swirls around this question about, did she leave him? Is she coming back? Now, this cop will track down that case that got tied up and say, full of clothes. So maybe she wasn't coming back. Maybe she was, in fact, getting on a train. They do have proof of a receipt that he bought a train ticket to send her away. She sent a postcard. This cop ends up building the idea that this couple is full of it, that they're wrong, and that they have almost concluded we overreacted and we got caught up in little bits. The saw, right? It was the guy wrapping a saw and a butcher knife in a newspaper. That's hard to shake.
But yet you're going to find out that this is at 5.5 months of a 6-month lease. So I'm like, oh, he's just packing up. That's why that mattress is rolled up. He's going to move.
Right.
He's just packing those knives up.
There's a valid explanation. If you want to take the sunny Lisa side of things, there's a reason why all of this is happening that has nothing to do with murder.
I don't want to accuse people of murder that might not be murderers. That's all. I want to be cautious.
I don't know. I take this whole thing as a little bit suspect because of the saw and because I've never seen people roll a mattress to move it. Maybe that's something you did in the 1950s, but I think something's in that mattress that you're hiding if you're rolling it up.
And Stella gets involved too. She comes over there for the physical therapy to give him back rubs. Initially, she's like, don't look out your window, don't analyze. But by this point, she's tracking down movers. There have been some guys that have picked up that case. She's buying it too. She's the one that first suggests that the wife is in fact going out the door in body parts, that in little bags and little trips. That is the truth. I don't think that we ever have that really underlined. Obviously, in a 1954 movie, they're not going to show a severed hand, a severed head. But if you're not really listening to the dialogue, you may, in fact, miss the fact that the wife was indeed cut up.
Yeah, I think, though, nobody will miss that. I think it's driven home pretty repeatedly in the dialogue, especially by Stella. And, when you're not looking out the window, there's not a lot to focus on but the dialogue. I was really keyed into every word being said here because there's not a lot to distract you.
Yeah, she's the one that first suggests that, like, oh, that thing's going to start dripping soon and all that. Like, she has a dark mind. As much as she wants to say she doesn't go there, I think anybody can get seduced. We as an audience are now being pulled in. It has been this slow-paced lull. We may have been concerned about how focused this movie is. But by this point, I would say, Arnie, I'm hoping you can confirm this, most people are into this movie by the 45-minute mark.
Into is a strong word for me to say with that. I'm much more keyed into the murder mystery, though, because I think he's full of it. I think he's wrong because we saw that woman leave.
Same here.
I don't believe him, but I want to see more evidence of it. So I'm more keyed into the murder mystery part. There's at least a hook going on now, but I can't say I'm fully into this movie because it's still moving rather slow. For what it is, which is a really kind of simple plot, the movie goes for almost 2 hours.
Again, it's not about the plot. And again, it's weird because modern audiences, and I can bet you any remake we're going to be talking about is going to be more fast-paced and focused on details and what can be known about them. Yes, it takes an hour to get a body, and it's not even the wife's body. It's a dog body. We've had this couple that I call the comic relief, who, because it's so hot, they have been sleeping outdoors on the fire escape, and they're so lazy that they don't want to walk downstairs to let their dog go to the bathroom. They have a basket they lower on a rope.
I was so scared for that dog. I thought for sure that dog was going to jump.
I don't know. This feels like something you'd see in a New York neighborhood like that.
Oh, yeah. All of these details were collected. Again, this is a real Greenwich Village courtyard. It wasn't in the story. They based it on a real place. And yes, this is what people did. Greenwich Village, it had that reputation. This would be where the beatniks were hanging in 1954. This was a happening hipster place. Why that older lady is sculpting, I think she calls it hunger.
Hunger. Yeah.
It's clearly a phallic and sexual looking thing that, yes, all of that artistry thing. I believe in all these quirky details. This is not suburbia. It'll be interesting to go there with Shia LaBeouf. If this is supposed to be some normal place and a murder happens. No, this is a quirky place where life is going on all the time and people are weird individuals.
Yeah, Stella says a line earlier about, like, what if people were looking in at you and what would they think of what you... And this is a thought I've had a lot, like, when I'm home alone and I realize I'm doing something weird. I'm like, what if, like, my family just walked in right now? Like, nothing dirty, people, just weird behavior you do on your own. Like, I really relate with that aspect of this film. So when you see Miss Lonely Heart having that dinner, pretending to be on a date, but no one's there, like, that's... Yeah, to me, that is this movie. It is not the murder mystery.
On the outside, she looks crazy, but if you were to project yourself into that, who hasn't talked to themselves? Who hasn't worked through a scenario? She will eventually have a suitor, so it's not like no one ever comes to visit her, but yes, she is trying to rehearse a life that she wants and goes out to the bar, comes home drunk. Yeah, the stories of all these characters are slowly unfolding. Miss Torso, the dancer, seems to be kissing some guys, but she always pushes them out at the end of the night. She never hooks up. The newlyweds never stop sleeping, but the husband starts to look more disgruntled, a little bit maybe more exhausted.
Yes.
By it all as the weeks go on. And of course, the musician. I always like this one, just coming from a creative process. He's trying to write a pop song. He starts by listening to the radio and he's banging on the keyboard. At one point, and this is a classic one, you're trying to do something and I'll just clean my house in my underwear. He's like mopping around and all that.
Isn't he like drunk? He's like stumbling around. Yeah.
Well, later he comes home drunk and throws the sheet music. But yes.
And let's not miss the Hitchcock cameo there. At one point, we see him composing, and Hitchcock's there for some reason winding a clock.
Yeah, I didn't notice Hitchcock because there's always so many people over there.
Hitchcock always, does make that cameo. Hitchcock apparently turns to him and lip readers will tell you he says B flat. So he's directing him to change the key of the song. But yes, we're seeing somebody trying to compose a piece of music. That, again, the story of that is actually going to bring Miss Lonely Hearts into his life later. So the theme of the movie, that people can have two different separate lives and come together. But yes, all of this is going on. And now there's a dead dog. And that gets everyone to stop. Murder is the one thing that will get everyone to leave their separate lives for a moment, peek their heads out. And yeah, it's a heart-wrenching scene where the, fur baby's mom is basically screaming, which one of you did it? I know that you're not caring people. I know that you're all self-absorbed. So why would you hurt an innocent little dog, the only thing that loved you all?
And this is the first time we've really seen this little courtyard neighborhood come together. I don't know if you'd call it coming together, but interacting. Like they've always been off in their own private lives. And it is this moment, a moment of tragedy. And I feel like that's some kind of social commentary.
Murder.
Yeah.
Murder brings us together.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Murder brought you all here to this movie. Yeah, we didn't come here for the comedy or the Miss Lonely Heart. We came here for the murder.
And of course, I feel worse for the dog than I do for the woman, but we see the corpse of the dog. We never see the corpse of the woman.
We don't know much about that woman.
Don't know much about that dog, except that it dug up Thorwald's garden. Thorwald, for a person who only had a 6-month lease, was very invested in his flowers. And the dog digging it up, I mean, it was quite clearly a stuffed animal for that dog. It's the worst thing since the baby in Sniper, but did feel bad for that poor pup.
And I love the reveal, though. Like, there's one person that wasn't sticking their head out the window, and you get that shot of Thorwald's apartment all in dark with one little red ember from his cigarette as he listens.
That is
such a good shot.
That image is so creepy of like, yes, that sometimes the blinds will be closed and sometimes the room is just dark. And the only reason why you know he's home is because we see that little bit of like flaming ash there just floating. And yes, he doesn't need to go out and see that the dog is dead because he obviously is the one that did it. Or at least that's Jeff's conclusion. That's a logical conclusion if you've been tracking the storyline, and it gets them back on the path. They were almost going to close the curtains and make whoopee, right? Lisa had come over. He always said he wanted a girl that could live out of one suitcase. She brought clothes for the weekend in one bag and is dressed in that nightie, and they're going to focus on themselves finally and shut that curtain. But now that there's a dead dog, they're both back at it, and the movie, I feel like, is running as fast as it's going to be. This movie, it's not, thriller. I think the modern idea of it is it's something more like North by Northwest with lots of chase scenes and daring do, but this is more about the tension. They're certain of their speculations now, and they're going to dig up that flower bed and see what's buried underneath because, yes, Jeff's photos, his slides, he's been snapping pictures for weeks because he's been bored out of his window, and the flowers have grown shorter over the weeks. That must mean that this guy put something in there. Do you think people realize that there's a hat box with her head in it? I feel like that's dialogue I had to really lean in to get.
What? No, I missed that line then.
I missed that too.
Yeah, her head's there. There is a hat box with the head.
That's not what was buried in the flower garden, though, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, it was her head? I figured you just put like a hand in there. A head's a big thing to have to bury in that flower garden.
Well, that's the problem, is that you could get the other stuff out in the little trips that he made, but you couldn't get rid of the head. And this is somewhat based on the true story I was telling you about the guy the bookkeeper that chopped up the woman and put the head in the fireplace to burn because he couldn't get rid of it. He first tried to put it in a hat box and put it under the garden, but then the dog was exposing it, so he moved it, killed the dog, and they find the hat box. It's said at the very end, they find the hat box with the head.
A lot of stuff is said at the very end, and yeah, I know I missed stuff at the end.
And that's what I mean, that like so much about what we know is in little glimpses that wouldn't get you necessarily to conclude murder. And that's the trick of this movie, is that, let me put it this way, I've seen this movie half a dozen times, and I don't think until I watched it this time, listening to every bit of dialogue, that I realized that's what the dog was digging up.
Yeah, I missed that bit too. I thought I saw at the end that somebody asked if they wanted to know what was in the garden, and Jimmy Stewart said no.
Stella makes a comment about not wanting to be any part of it, and then she realizes that it's a part of the mistress. That's maybe the line you're thinking of?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
So yes, now Lisa is active. They want to do stuff. So Jeff is going to write a note and they're going to get involved. This is no longer about watching a movie. She's going to walk over there and slip under the door a message saying, I know what you did. Again, I love this stuff. I love the dollhouse aspect of, you can see all of these things going on and your attention being pulled between all of these squares as she's coming up. What she doesn't know behind one door and that he's coming to the door. All of that stuff is good tension.
Yeah, it's great tension, and it's going to play out later on, but like the reason it's such great tension is because Jeff is in a wheelchair. They don't have cell phones because it's 1954. Like, if he sees something bad going on, he cannot warn her, and that creates a lot of tension, especially towards the end. Like, yeah, it's a great aspect of this film.
They say that he'll set off a flash bulb because he is a photographer. So if something happens, he'll set off a flash. But the distraction he has and the cinematography here, the camera just moves from window to window and shows so much. And yeah, the word dollhouse you use, Stuart, I really like that. This is my favorite part of the movie, is the suspense of Lisa going into that building and what's going to happen. And really, it puts you in the place of Jeff emotionally. I'm finding myself getting tense because, like Jeff, you're stuck there as a viewer, as the voyeur who can't really do anything. And you've come to care about Lisa over the course of this movie.
Just as he has, yes. He has new respect for her. Watch Jimmy Stewart's face once she starts putting clues together and all of that. Like, he is falling in love with her for the first time. He is realizing she can be and share what he cares about. Yeah, it's very sweet. Impotent is the word that often gets written about that. The fact that his leg is in the cast. And Hitchcock did have a dirty mind. If you're seeing phallic symbols and all of that is intentional. This is a man that is stuck there holding his camera lens, can do nothing but flash while the story is unfolding.
And I think Doyle, the way he comes in and out, helps sell that relationship with Jeff and Lisa. The fact that he comes over one time and he sees that nightgown for Lisa. And like, you could see him drawing conclusions, just like Jeff has been drawing conclusions about Thorwald. Again, it's just a great way to reinforce these themes. No one has all the information, and yet they're making judgments and conclusions based off that.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Doyle had told them, because he was basically out, he's like, if you need any more help in that, use the phone book. Well, as it were.
Yes, he uses it.
Jeff actually decides, hey, we know the guy's name. We got it off the mailbox. We know his address. This was an era pre-internet where you just had a giant book of phone numbers and look up the last name. There he is. They can call the guy.
In this day of privacy, I can't believe we all used to just have our phone numbers out there for anybody to call.
Mm-hmm. Which is sort of the point of this movie, too, is that there is so much for us to see into people's lives if we just look. Like, yeah, so much that is exposed. And in a place like New York City, where people live on top of each other, you get trained not to, right? I'm just going to focus on my sculpture. I'm just going to focus on my garden. I don't want to have to look at anything that's going on. Unless you got a corpse, I'm not going to peek out my window or over my fence.
Yeah, what's the famous thing in like the 70s where the woman's getting raped in the alley screaming for help and just no one called the police in New York? Like, that's, yeah.
I think that did get debunked, but yes, they still use that in psychology classes to talk about the spectator effect, yes. But people won't get involved. And this is what's different, is that they're not just going to be Peeping Tom. They're not going to just watch a murder happen. They're going to maybe bring him to justice. So this phone call means the guy wanders to that bar across the street, and Lisa can go with Stella and try to dig up that flower bed, except the hat box has already been moved. And again, this is where Lisa becomes the dream girl. Even in those impractical high heels, she's going to climb that ladder. I get nervous for her when her like legs are straddling over into the window and she climbs in. And then, of course, the killer comes back.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be a tragedy. Like, is she going to fall from that window and kill herself or something for being a snoop?
Yeah. And at the same time, it should be said, because Hitchcock is a juggler, and because all filmmakers, it's not always about suspense. You also have comedy, drama, what have you. Well, he's going to throw in this tragic bit about Mrs. Lonelyheart. We had seen that she, yes, was a woman that drank alone and talked to imaginary suitors, would maybe go out to the bar, finally brought one home, and he got grabby. She had to kick him out. Could have gotten even worse.
She may be lonely, but she's a woman of standards.
Right. And now, throughout this whole scene as it's been unfolding, that kind of looks like sleeping pills. That kind of looks like she's writing a note.
Yeah, Stella's like, that's enough pills to put like half the city to sleep. I'm like, you should go do something then if you know that, because you're a nurse.
Right. Yeah. But a couple things in that. Getting involved means that you've been snooping. And two, I don't know. We're always so nervous to do that, right? We're always so nervous, even when it's a horrific event, to be able to put ourselves into the storyline, to not be the voyeur. But they decide that they can call the police. Ironically, they call the police to stop Mrs. Lonelyheart, but the police end up coming to save Lisa, because as she's going through the apartment, Thorwald comes back and catches her in the act. It's a great juggling of tension.
And this has got to be bad news if the cops are showing up, because she's the one going to jail. Like, she's breaking and entering, and we're going to find out she even stole a ring.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing, right? The cops are saving her because she definitely would have been murdered. We definitely see that Thorwald had his hands around her throat. The light gets turned out and she blows the cover too. She looks out the window and screams, Jeff.
That's not what tips him off, because I don't think Thorwald knows who his neighbors are. Thorwald sees Lisa pointing at the ring, signaling to Jeff across the way, and he looks across the way and realizes, oh, whoever's in there has been watching me.
I mean, I think it's both. I think it starts with her saying, Jeff, Jeff. Okay, there's a guy named Jeff that's around. And then, yes, once the cops arrive, she finds the evidence that the wedding band of the wife was left behind. To her, that's conclusive that the wife is dead because you don't leave without your wedding band. And again, adding to the other layer, the real story going on, she's telling him, we should get married now, right? You had such hesitation that I'm the girl that you wanted. I've proven myself, right? Let's put a ring on it. And as soon as she gets out of jail, you feel like this couple can consummate.
So, Stuart, I want you to, whatever the subtext is, whatever could justify this ending, because to me, the story is Lisa gave her heart to Jeff. She's like, I could eat those fish heads and rice. I'll get involved with this murder case. And then there should be a penalty for that. Like, I don't understand this happy ending that snooping is a good thing. Jeff was right all along. Maybe it's 1954, and that's the reason.
I mean, look, most films end happily, and you could argue about how happy the ending is. I mean, I think there's definitely shades of gray to it, but most thrillers do end with, yes, the killer being brought to justice. I don't think that's unusual or even something I don't want to see. I would like for them to make it.
But if this is about subjectivity, should a killer even be found? If this is about voyeurism, to me, this isn't a murder mystery. Like, that's a vehicle to make another point, but then it doesn't make that point. So I guess it is just a murder mystery.
No, I'm confused by your confusion.
This feels like an endorsement. Yes, snoop, look into your neighbor's window, draw conclusions, call the police, swat them, whatever.
I'll tell you how I would frame it. You get what you see. This man saw negativity and darkness and found it, right? Because that was his worldview. And because she tried so hard to see the world through his lens, she was able to see it and help him, and they were able to connect with each other in that process. Whether they should be doing that or not is an open-ended question. I'd leave that up to each individual. But for the purposes of a story that has been open this far, yeah, I want a climax that resolves some of this. I want that moment of tension where he thinks he picks up the phone to tell Doyle what he's figured out and realizes that, yeah, Raymond Burr has looked in the phone book and found the Jeff across the way, and now he's exposed, trapped. I'm in this wheelchair, a sitting duck. Everyone is gone.
With just flashbulbs to save himself.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that way that scene is filmed because we get Thorwald's POV and it's just this red circle fading. I mean, it's not going to help Jeff very long to have these flashbulbs, but...
I mean, Thorwald, just put a hand over your eyes. You don't have to go blind every time he sets it off.
His weapon is his camera. I mean, again, that's the metaphor of all of this. This is all he's got at this point. Yes, he can hopefully distract him. And there's, I don't know, the tension of that moment. So much of this has been about what have we seen, but it's the sound design. When everything is really quiet and we hear those footsteps approach and we're just anticipating. And, you know, I guess the era where people don't lock their front door.
He's got to have people visit him and he's in a wheelchair. That's how I took it, that like his door's just open.
Yeah, Burr just walks in and, I mean, he's not the killer yet, right? This is a big Hitchcock theme, that killers are ordinary. They're everyday people. That this guy is just like, what do you want? I don't have any money if you want to blackmail me. I'm like, why did you pick on me? Why did you even care that I killed my wife? Why can't I get away with my mistress? You know, like there is something kind of sad and pathetic about Burr. And then he gets scary, right? Because then he lunges for Jimmy Stewart. And apparently, I don't have any visual references for this, but Hitchcock made sure that Burr had the same haircut and the same look as producer David O. Selznick. I guess he really didn't like him. They had worked together on Rebecca. That was the producer of Gone with the Wind. A producer known for directing directors. So I think that this is his revenge by making David O. Selznick the killer about to throw the director out the window.
It's the one moment where Thorwald, I get it, he's perhaps panicking because somebody knows his secret, but Thorwald was such a methodical murderer and did everything so well, with the exception of burying the head in the garden, I guess. But everything was covered up. Nobody was believing that it was murder. Even a police detective had written it off as paranoid fantasy. And yet to throw this guy out the window was clearly going to implicate him.
Well, at this point, it was just, what could he do? I'm going to go out killing you, right? Like, he knows. And the cops, are there now in his apartment looking across the way at them. They're now the attraction. It's flip roles. Yeah, all they can do is run over and kind of break Jimmy Stewart's fall. He has that drop that, lucky for him, is just only going to break 2 of his legs and not his head.
Lucky for this film, it's 1954, and I could buy this blue screen.
Oh my God. Yeah, lucky for viewers, it's only like 2 seconds of him falling because the Joker at the end of Batman, this is not. Hans Gruber, this is not. This does not look good.
Well, I hear you guys mocking the visual effects of the time, but there are critics that would make the case that these are subjective states. And so if they look dreamy or surreal or not realistic, that's Hitchcock's world.
Okay, now they're reading too much into it.
Well, maybe, but I do think Hitchcock is a master of control as well as suspense. Again, that's why he built everything on a set as opposed to going to the actual location. Is I want to be control of the lighting, all the elements, all these actors in all these rooms that wore earpieces so that he could tell them at any given moment, do your ballet move here, do that. He was directing everything. And I think, again, if there's an unconvincing shot in this, it must be for a reason. That is the thesis that many people will take, and that this is, a subjective state of Jeff, falling into full delusion, falling in love. He certainly winds up into the arms of Lisa, and we'll see at the, epilogue here, they're sort of together. She's not wearing a ring, but she's at least pretending to read his Himalayan adventure novels, and then when he's asleep, she'll sneak in the fashion stuff. She hasn't changed for him.
I do find it amusing. I laughed out loud that now he has 2 broken legs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought the best joke was, as we're getting resolutions with each of these windows, we've had Miss Torso, all these men whining and dining her. She's the hot one. And her boyfriend, I guess, or maybe husband, returns from the army, and he's just this, dweeby nerd.
Little guy.
And he's not so interested in her, he wants food.
Yes.
Although that's a Hitchcock thing. Apparently, food is always a symbol for about to have sex. If you look throughout his movies, people are always talking about what they're about to eat. And that's because they're about to screw. But yeah, the other thing that's happened, again, we've watched the score be composed throughout the movie. You said there's no score to this, but we've had a musician banging away on a piano. He eventually invited some friends over and they recorded it. And it was that music. It wasn't the police. It was that music that stopped Mrs. Lonely Hearts. She did not take those pills because she was so moved by it. And we have this final moment of her up there listening to that record with him. Will they hook up? It's the same ambiguity that hangs over Lisa and Jeff. I'm not sure that they are going to get married, but they're in the same room.
Meanwhile, the newlyweds are having a fight, though. So even if they do get married, it shows wedded bliss does not last forever.
Yeah, that's why I don't think it's a totally cheesy, happy ending. It shows relationships as a cycle of coming together and breaking apart. And that, Jeff at some points put his girl in the room with the killer to be taken out. But in this moment is smiling, is asleep, is happily convalescing with her. And maybe, just maybe, she'll still be the girl that he wants when he gets out of those casts. The shades come down and like a movie, like a play, the movie is over and we're left with all those questions.
Well, the only question I'm left with is, Jakob, Stuart, do you recommend Rear Window? Jakob.
There's a couple 2023 movies that really stood out for me. My favorite film of the year was a French film called Anatomy of a Fall. There's also a Nick Cage movie, Dream Scenario, and I felt like they both they felt very modern about how we act a lot based on very little information. Life is very subjective and we try to make very objective conclusions based on that little information. So I'm watching Rear Window, and for an hour and 55 minutes of the 2 hours, I'm like, wow, 1954, they're doing Reddit the movie about how subjectivity and how we make awful conclusions. And then it has this weird, no, they were right, like snooping might be a good thing. Like that is my one conflict with this film. It does not ruin the film for me. Sometimes a bad ending can ruin a film that I've really enjoyed, but like this one was like a great 5 out of 5 movie until like that last 5 minutes. I'm like, I really didn't like that. But there's so much here to enjoy. Like I said, I kind of feel like this ends up just being a murder mystery by the end, but it's a really artsy murder mystery. And it does deal with a lot of subjects about how we view people and what if they saw us. I would have loved to seen some kind of exploration. Like, what did people think of Jeff throughout this? Like, if we got some reverse image at the end and what all the conclusions they were drawing about him as he snooped around or something like that. Maybe De Palma will do something like this. I've seen Blowout and like, yeah, that has a much darker turn in it. So I don't know. That's the 2024 me talking. But yes, this is a masterful film in acting and dialogue and just shot compositions and yes, suspense. Like there is a reason Hitch is called the master of suspense. And there are so many times throughout this film, even though I thought I had seen it, like where I just caught up in those moments and just great scenarios that play out where Jimmy Stewart can't move and how is Lisa going to get through it. Like, yeah, there's so much here, even though I hate the ending, there's so much here to chew on and enjoy. So it's still a very strong recommend.
Stuart.
Before I get into my thoughts, just so I can really understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
What you don't like about the end is because the conclusions they drew, which should have been wrong because they were based on not enough information, were right.
Yeah, it feels like this should have been a lesson that Jeff and Lisa learned.
There should have been no murder.
Correct.
They projected a whole lot of shit on an innocent man.
Yeah, that's where I thought it was building to.
There's a lot of Hitchcock movies about that, by the way. The innocent man is a theme.
Yeah, that's why I thought this was going to go that way.
This one is a different take on that. And yes, which Hitchcock do you start? Obviously, he's got a lot of stuff, probably at least 25 films that are deemed bona fide classics. I can see why you go to this one first. Because, one, it demonstrates his total technical control. He has, in fact, constructed a living dollhouse and juggles all our attention through all the different elements of movies. It's very postmodern in that there's the guy putting together the music. There's the woman in the art department. She has a hearing aid. She turns the music off and creates something visually with her sculptures. You have the comedy on the fire escape. You have the sex appeal and the newlyweds coming over. You have the tragedy of Miss Lonely Hearts. And yes, you have what is going to unify everything. The one thing that can bring everyone together. You might only be interested in some of these windows, but everyone wants to look into a window where there might have been a murder and the suspense of that. And yes, watching the way, and Hitch kind of putting himself in that position too. If Jimmy Stewart is in fact the director, watching the way that he allows the story to unfold without him and how he chooses to get involved is very, very interesting and autobiographical. And I'm just going to argue, if you miss all of those details, it's just kind of a beautiful love story. And I think so often when you hear about love stories, you think of cheesy romance, you think about warm, swelling feelings. But to me, it's about watching a guy who's nervous about engagement end up sharing the same vision as a lady he doesn't think has the capacity to understand his darkness. And to me, that is what really moves me about Rear Window, is watching Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart fall in love, while maybe, probably, it seems to be there's a murder story going on in the background. That what usually is subtext has been put on full view. It's the main composition of the store window, and I love it. So that, to me, is the reason to see Rear Window, but there are hundreds of reasons to do so. And I think, yeah, you get the idea that so much, it's not surprising that this is an evergreen story, that so many directors would return to this and remake it officially and unofficially for years to come. It's a very inspiring movie.
Well, that super strong recommend makes me feel a little bit chagrined and embarrassed because I'm going to give this a weak recommend.
You are recommending it.
I am recommending it. And what I said earlier is the reason.
Okay. Well, that's a win.
The strong acting, the performances in this, plus the suspense of that scene where Lisa is running into the apartment building and the way that's filmed, all of that, the last half hour of the film is giving me a recommend here. But I feel that this is kind of languidly paced. I get the stuff about the marriage and the relationship between Lisa and Jeff, but I'm more into that in the first half hour, and I see that evolution. But what I'm more interested in is the murder mystery stuff, which I feel takes a while to get to. And so the languid pace kind of turned me off on this. And during the first hour of this film, I thought it would be a not recommend. And I know that's a controversial statement, and I'm probably going to get a little bit of hate online for it because this is such a beloved film by film scholars. But there's enough here for me to give it a recommend. But of the 3 or 4 Hitchcock films I've seen, this is my least favorite.
I mean, I get you want to eat dessert first. Like sometimes you're like, give me the tastiest things. And this does make you wait. What I would argue is when you adjust your palate, you can enjoy every course. And eventually, yeah, it really does become that murder mystery you want, Arnie. It's there too. It's one of the rooms in a whole courtyard of wonderful filmmaking techniques.
Yeah, one thing you said, Stuart, and you recommend that I want to underline is the romance. I know we've talked a lot about modern films, modern audiences don't want romance and love stories. And I know I've been on that side. Like, I've complained about that at times. But, like, this one, I'm like, oh, this is how you do good romance that's steamy and hot. And, like, I care about this couple. Like, yeah, that is one note I made is, like, I usually don't want romance stuff in movies. It feels very, like, unless it's a rom-com, I guess. Like, it just feels thrown in and not well developed. But here, like, this is a romance movie to a point.
Again, that's my thesis, is that you think you're coming for a murder mystery, and what you get is a love story. Yeah, the love story is normally the subplot. The murder mystery is the subplot. It flips it. It inverses it. And while that can be a struggle, anytime someone does something unexpected and new, revolutionary, Hitchcock made a career out of that, it can throw you. Sit with it, think about it, process it, rewatch it. I think, yeah, to me, this is one of his very best films. If you only see one Hitchcock movie, yeah, maybe Rear Window is the right one to pick.
And I would say if you only see one Hitchcock movie, it would actually be Vertigo over Psycho.
They're a twofer. I almost want to do Vertigo next because, again, like I said, what it says about Hitchcock is so just interesting from that standpoint. But in many ways, Vertigo is a very impressive movie.
So, Ole, what do you think after hearing these recommends? Where do you stand?
Well, I thought it was very interesting to listen to your conversation. I sort of appreciate Arnie's point of view because I read a lot about Hitchcock this past week and that he wasn't necessarily a universally beloved director at the time. So it was nice to hear sort of different points of view on it. But for me, the reason why I sort of love this movie today and why it's one of my favorite movies is because I feel like it is a movie about movies and that's sort of what I get out of it. I still relate to the Jimmy Stewart character and how what he's viewing is sort of also impacting his personal life. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's not what you expect. When I hear Rear Window, I think, oh, somebody looks across the way and sees something. I'm guessing. You would know. You've seen Disturbia. I haven't. Body Double is a hazy memory. I remember some things about it and they anger me, but I don't really remember the plot too much. How much of this will carry on in the movies you've chosen to cover? Can you speak to that?
So I don't remember that much about Body Double either. I also just remember not loving it at the time.
The ending. I remember the twist ending. Oof.
But Disturbia is sort of like a wannabe Spielberg version of this.
Oh, interesting.
I think Spielberg produced it.
He did.
Yeah. So that definitely has a lot in common with, E.T. and yeah.
And you connected with that one because you were a kid and he was a kid, right? He's under house arrest or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Disturbia, a lot of the same things occur. He's looking out the windows and seeing things in suburbia.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am grateful that we are going to movies influenced by Rear Window rather than next week going to the actual remake, because they did do that.
I remember this. Yeah.
Yes, in the late 90s.
I do too. I saw it.
Yeah.
I actually watched it. I watched it before I ever watched the Hitchcock one, but I don't remember a whole lot about it. It's been over 20 years.
Yeah, I went back and rewatched it yesterday. Or not rewatched. I saw the last 5 minutes of it back when it aired in 1997 and was so horrified that I thought it was a terrible film. The truth of the matter is, Rear Window 1997 is an okay-ish TV movie for about 3/4 of it. What they have done, God bless them, Christopher Reeve, after his horse riding accident, was mostly paralyzed and they wanted to give him work. And so they tried to make the equivalent that if Jimmy Stewart had a broken leg, we can make a story about a man that has just been in a car accident.
So it's not a horse accident in the movie. It is something different.
Well, it changes everything that it's not about voyeurs, but it's really about paralysis. Suddenly, this is about a man trying to regain the power to walk again. And so, that just changes the way I feel about the whole story. It's not about peeping toms. It's not about doing illicit things. It's about a victim. So this happened to him, and how will he move on? He ends up looking out his window because he's an architect, and the building across the way, they're working on it. They're constructing an art gallery. And then then when you know it, one of the artists lives down below, and they try very 90s things. It's very cute. He's in America Online talking to his girlfriend and gets caught by his live-in girlfriend, and then she walks out. Or was she murdered? So, kind of the same thing. They put little modern twists. There's like a gay couple instead of the musician. They tried to make it hip in 1997. It's mostly kind of average, but the ending, it's the painful in the ending is that Reeves has to go to like cyberspace and send emails and set up cameras and
Becomes a hacker thriller.
try to get hacker thriller a little, and then a chase scene where they've cut his oxygen tube and he's rolling around at like 2 miles an hour and it's supposed to be a chase. It's a really bad way to end that story.
I feel bad for thinking this sounds funny, but it sounds funny.
Yeah. That's exactly the feeling, is I want to laugh and I hate myself for having that emotion. It just, you walk away feeling shame watching that 97 remake. I just felt so awful. And also going to throw out there, they've turned it into a board game recently. I wanted to know how they did this. It's kind of like a more intricate version of Clue, or if you've ever played the game Mysterium, it's really that, basically.
This had to be a Kickstarter. I feel like this pops up on Kickstarter a lot. Let's take some old movie and turn it into a role-playing game.
Right. Why do we need to do that now? Like, what has it been? 70 years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can be Jimmy Stewart. You can be Grace Kelly. You can be Stella. Yeah, I would want to be Stella.
That's the one I want to be, yeah.
The cop. And you can be Alfred Hitchcock. So Alfred Hitchcock hides behind the courtyard and basically it's a game of deduction. You see these windows and director shows you flashes of things and you try to decide who is in which window. You only have 4 days to do it. And what I like about it is there may not be a murder. Not every time you watch it is there a murder. So you might, like Jimmy Stewart, kind of like the ending you wanted, Jacob.
The ending I want, yes. I like this game already.
You might play the game thinking, he killed her. And nope, that didn't even happen. You're just a Snoopy Peeping Tom with judgments and you need to check yourself. So it's kind of a fun twist. I might pick it up. But we're moving on from Rear Window and moving into Brian De Palma with the 1984 thriller Body Double with Melanie Griffith.
Haven't seen it.
No, me either. I'm going to be completely new to this one.
My memory is I hated it, but that was also my memory of Dressed to Kill. And then when we revisited that movie, I loved it. So maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. It is definitely Hitchcock inspired, and it will definitely have a strong tie.
I mean, it's De Palma.
It will have a very strong tie to what we just watched. Again, I appreciate, Ole, that you're having us do this kind of work, looking at how a story can evolve into a different kind of movie experience.
And meanwhile, this Friday, if you are a patron of $10 or more on Apple or Podbean or Patreon or Spotify, the February patron show is coming out in a little bit early for Valentine's Day. Another noir murder kind of movie, Madonna's Body of Evidence.
Maybe not quite as celebrated as Hitchcock. I'm going to just put it out there. Does not get the same appreciation as Rear Window.
Yeah, can Madonna be as steamy and sexy as Grace Kelly in this film?
She's definitely going to show more. And, that we would expect nothing less from Madonna. But the movie's full of surprises. And I just want to prepare people. It's a wild one. And I hope you can join us for that conversation.
Yep, you can find the details on how to become a patron on our website, nowplayingpodcast.com. So, Ole, thank you again for picking this. We'll have you back on the show with us for the next 2 weeks talking about these movies. And Jakob Stewart, thank you for joining me.
You bet.
And until next time, have a pleasant dinner, Mr. Jeffries.
Why would a man leave his apartment 3 times on a rainy night with a suitcase and come back 3 times? Or why didn't he go to work today? What's interesting about a butcher knife and a small saw wrapped in newspaper, huh?
Thank you for listening to this Now Playing Podcast movie review. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Lisa, it's perfect. As always.
And a special thank you to Ole Horve for his amazing support of Now Playing and for picking Rear Window for our hosts to review.
It's almost as if it were being written especially for us.
Help us spread the word about this show by leaving a 5-star review on Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes, or your podcast store of choice.
You can't buy that kind of publicity.
I know.
Want more reviews like this one? In the archives section of NowPlayingPodcast.com, you'll find more than 1,000 in-depth movie reviews from our panel of hosts. And come back to NowPlayingPodcast.com next Tuesday for another all-new movie review podcast.
But I'm going to make this a week you'll never forget.
Support from listeners like you keeps Now Playing Podcast on the air. You can donate directly by tapping the support button at NowPlayingPodcast.com.
Get my billfold out of the drawer on the table there.
And you can join our crowdfunding campaign for early access to new episodes, exclusive reviews, and bonus reviews.
Couldn't we just keep things status quo?
Now Playing Podcast is produced and edited by Arnie Carvalho.
In this job, you don't sleep very much, you bathe less.
Associate produced by Jason Latham.
Don't you ever have any problems?
I have one.
Now Playing credits read by Brock.
Why don't you shut up?
The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual hosts and may not reflect the views of Venganza Media Incorporated.
I made a simple statement. A true statement, but I can back it up if you just shut up for a minute.
Venganza Media Incorporated is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by any entity that created the film analyzed herein. All movie clips and music included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended.
Jeff, I'll be honest with you. You're beginning to scare me a little.
Now Playing Podcast is an exclusive trademark of and may not be used without the express written permission of Venganza Media Incorporated. Now Playing is a Venganza Media production, copyright 2024, and no part of this show may be reproduced, repurposed, or redistributed without the written permission of Venganza Media Incorporated. All rights reserved.
Get out of my life, you perfectly wonderful woman. You're too good for me.